Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Boston Globe politics reporter Emma Platoff, welcome back to The Common.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. So, Emma, we got you here because the preliminary municipal elections will be here soon, September 12th. And this is a pretty interesting election because it comes at a time when there's a lot going on in Boston City Council, right? You have some embattled councilors fighting to keep their seats. You have some councilors leaving. And this election is an opportunity for residents in the city to kind of narrow down the candidates, you know, as they decide what direction they want to see their city council go. So give us a quick rundown of what districts have preliminary races this year.
Yeah, so just as you said, this is the first opportunity for voters to narrow down the field of who will represent them on the Boston City Council. There's a second round of voting that'll come in November. This has been, as regular listeners of The Common know, a really chaotic 2-year term for the Boston City Council. And for me, September 12th is a particularly important day because it is the first real opportunity voters will have to weigh in on the chaos that has been this latest council term. Whether they want to replace some of the folks at the heart of it. Some people are leaving the council, as you said, so we'll have some fresh faces regardless. So there are 4 districts that have preliminary elections in September. There is an open seat in Dorchester-based District 3, where Frank Baker is not running for re-election. And then in Districts 5, 6, and 7, 3 incumbent councilors are facing re-election challenges. So in numerical order, that's District 5 is Ricardo Arroyo, District 6, that's Kendra Lara, and District 7, that's Councilor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson.
Okay, let's start with District 5. That's Ricardo Arroyo's district. He's probably had the most interesting year because last year he was in a DA race, which got pretty nasty, especially when the Boston Globe reported that he was the subject of 2 sexual assault investigations more than a decade ago. Arroyo denied the allegations and said he was not aware of the complaints, and these complaints did not result in any criminal charges, to be clear, right? But then it was later found that the former U.S. Attorney General Rachel Rollins tried to influence that race in Arroyo's favor, which led to her resignation as U.S. Attorney. And then, most recently, Arroyo was fined for violating state conflict of interest laws. So there's a lot going on with Arroyo, and I wonder, what is Arroyo saying going into this election?
Yeah, certainly Ricardo Arroyo is maybe the councilor who's seen his name, splashed across the highest number of these kind of difficult headlines. When I ask Arroyo about his reelection bid, he says he's out there knocking on doors. And for the most part, what he says is that voters are less interested in talking about sort of that personal baggage and those scandals and more interested in talking about issues. His pitch is, I've been a strong progressive voice on the council. He has been the chair of the council's powerful government operations committee, which is where a lot of the most important legislation that it considers goes through. And so his sort of reelection pitch is, don't worry about that stuff. Look at the votes that I've taken and on the policies that I support and judge me on that.
And talk to me about his competition. Mayor Wu lives in District 5 and endorsed Arroyo's competitor, Enrique Pepin. What can we take from that?
Yeah, a super notable endorsement from, perhaps the most prominent resident of District 5. Mayor Wu lives in Roslindale and endorsed Enrique Pepin, who has been, a longtime aide at City Hall. She said, he's the exact kind of leader that we need on the city council. Pepin has presented himself as sort of this progressive alternative. He's someone who would push many of the same policies as Arroyo without bringing all the same personal baggage. But to me, at least as a politics report, it was very notable for the mayor to endorse him over Ricardo Arroyo, who has been a political ally to her and who has been, a huge help to her on the council. He's often been the one to shepherd many of her initiatives through that body. So to me, that was a notable snub for her to endorse against him.
Mm-hmm.
There are two other candidates in the race. I think the other one that folks are watching most closely is a former longtime Boston police officer, Jose Ruiz, who's seen as sort of the more moderate candidate in the race. And then the fourth candidate is someone who has run for the seat before, whose name is John Claude Sinon.
Okay, well, that's District 5. Now on to District 6, which is currently represented by Councilor Kendra Lara. She has also had a troublesome summer after she got into a car accident. What's the latest there?
So it's sort of a similar story in District 6. You have, in Kendra Lara, one of the council's most prominent progressive voices, endorsed by the DSA, facing a re-election challenge amid a time of personal scandal. So on June 30th, Kendra Lara was driving what police say was an uninsured, unregistered vehicle at more than twice the speed limit on Center Street in Jamaica Plain when she crashed into a house, causing significant damage. Her young son was in the back seat. I believe he was 7 at the time, was not restrained in a booster seat, as is required by law. This is all according to police reports. And so she is facing criminal charges related to that crash and has entered a not guilty plea. So, but all that's going on, as she's attempting to pitch herself to this district, which includes uber progressive parts of the city like Jamaica Plain, but also some of its more conservative and whiter neighborhoods, notably West Roxbury. So much like Ricardo Arroyo, she faces one challenger, Benjamin Weber, who's a workers' rights attorney who lives in Jamaica Plain, who's sort of saying, hey, I'll vote in a lot of the same ways as Kendra Lara might, but I don't bring along any of this baggage. You don't have to worry about this drama or this scandal from me, but you'll still get the progressive politics. Her other opponent in that race is a guy named William King, who's an IT director at a nonprofit, has also run for council before unsuccessfully. And he lives in West Roxbury, which again is the more conservative part of that district. And he is seen as sort of the more moderate candidate with support from some of the council's most conservative voices, Frank Baker and Aaron Murphy.
Mm-hmm. Well, what specifically is Kendra Lara telling voters going into these elections?
Yeah, it's much that same message. She's saying, please don't judge me based on my worst day. Please judge me on a 2-year record of pushing for progressive policy. And I think it just sort of remains to be seen how persuasive that message is to progressive voters in the district.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Politics has never been stranger or more online, which is why the politics team at Wired is making a new show, Wired Politics Lab. It's all about how to navigate the endless stream of news and information and what to look out for. Each week on the show, we'll dig into far-right platforms, AI chatbots, influencer campaigns, and so much more. Wired Politics Lab launches Thursday, April 11th. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts.
And we are back with Emma Platoff. Emma, what does this election mean for progressive politics in the city?
This is a huge test for the progressive movement in Boston. We have seen over the last decade the Boston City Council become a lot more progressive and a lot more diverse. And the 2021 election, when many of these councilors were swept into office, when Michelle Wu won the mayor's office, was a really important turning point in that movement. And I think that some folks in that progressive movement are worried that sort of the most prominent members of it, some of the most outspoken progressive councilors have been involved in these very high-profile personal dramas and scandals. It's important to note The progressives on the council are certainly do not have a monopoly on the drama on the council.
Yeah.
Many of the stories we've talked about on this show and elsewhere involve other councilors. The most conservative voice on the council, many would argue, is Frank Baker, and it's often been his kind of outspoken remarks and sometimes name calling that disrupts council proceedings. And so it's important to say that it's not just these few folks we're talking about who are running for re-election, but I think that the headlines out of the Boston City Council over the last almost 2 years, and I know because I've been writing many of them, has been chaos, dysfunction, division, lack of productivity, maps struck down in federal court. It has been a tough 2 years for this council. And so it will be interesting to see what voters make of that and whether, they say, we think these folks can turn it around and we want to give them another shot, or it's time to see fresh leadership.
Yeah. Is this something that could motivate voter decisions as they head to the polls?
I think that's the big question that we should talk about, after September 12th. But certainly you see at least some groups sort of sticking by their folks here. Some progressive groups are standing by these counselors, even despite everything that's going on. And I think many voters will as well. There's also, significant questions about name recognition, which is a huge advantage for incumbent counselors. It's a lot easier to win a district if you've already won that district. And as much as, we love to believe that everyone in Boston listens to the Common, and I hope that more people will, some people haven't been following these headlines, and they may say, oh, yeah, Kendra Lara, I met her at an event once. And many people don't know all of the details of this. So I think the answer to that question will come in a couple weeks.
Got it. And also, we'd have to consider that the turnout may not be too strong because we're not voting for a mayor this time around, right?
Yeah, turnout in Boston is often disappointingly low, even when we are voting for a mayor. I don't remember the exact figures from 2 years ago, but there was all this talk that this was this huge historic mayoral election, and it really was, but that did not motivate, a huge number of Boston voters to get to the polls. So that's a great reminder that, elections are decided by those who show up, and the deadline to register to vote in the September 12th primary is September 2nd.
September 2nd. All right. You got a few days, folks. Before we go, I want to talk about District 3, Baker's district. Now, like you said before, he's leaving after this term. District 3's preliminary race is pretty crowded, right? Could you give us a quick overview of that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really fascinating and extremely crowded race. There are 7 candidates running for an open seat to represent this Dorchester-based district. And I think to your point about, incumbents losing re-election races, this is exactly why this race is so crowded, right? Because it's so much easier to win an open seat than it is to oust an incumbent. So we have seen this race draw significant attention. Deval Patrick is hosting a fundraiser for one of the candidates. Marty Walsh has endorsed one of the candidates. There's a lot of different people involved with a lot of different perspectives to offer. And so remains to be seen, where voters go. But we will see the September 12th election whittle the field down to 2, and then we'll see who proceeds to November.
Real quick, City Councilor Michael Flaherty, who is an at-large councilor, he's leaving as well. What kind of impact will his absence have?
Yeah, Michael Flaherty, a longtime at-large councilor, is leaving this year, as is Frank Baker, who's a long-serving councilor representing Dorchester. And they are the 2 longest-serving and also 2 of the most moderate voices on the council. So it really remains to be seen whether they will be replaced with folks who bring sort of that same political perspective, or whether they are replaced by folks a little further to the left who maybe tilt the council more in that direction.
Emma, thank you so much for coming through to the Common and sharing your expertise with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And I hope that all of your listeners register to vote and cast their ballots. No matter who you vote for, it's very important to vote. That's my plea.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's Boston Globe politics reporter Emma Platoff. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you like what you're hearing, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple or Spotify. Rate and review us. It would be a huge help. thank you ahead of time. Also, if you want to get in touch with us, hit us up on Instagram at WBUR The Common, or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. And folks, don't forget, the deadline to register to vote in the preliminary election is September 2nd at 5 p.m. So get on that so you can participate. And with that, I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.